Former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper announced the end of his 2020 presidential campaign on Thursday. Hickenlooper released a video where he said that he will never stop believing that America can move forward when we all work together. Talking about optimism. Hickenlooper also took the time to address a potential U.S. Senate run and said he would give it, quote, he would have to give it some serious thought. Patty, what is giving it serious thought? What does that mean?
I think it means he's going to think about it seriously, because he's certainly been encouraged not only nationally, where there's been a lot of push because Cory Gardner looks so vulnerable. But, at this point, this coffee cup might be able to beat Cory Gardner. He looks vulnerable, and locally people are pushing, but maybe not as much locally as it seems when you're off in Iowa. Because immediately after Hickenlooper put up that video yesterday morning, folksy kept the same message he'd had when he announced he was running back in March. Very kumbaya, come together, let's work together. Several of the Senate candidates, what are there? There are 11 already still out there. We're not welcoming him into the fold. I don't think Dan Baer or Mike Johnston said anything, but certainly Angela Williams really took off and said he's not as progressive as the message people want to hear these days. So he's not going to be welcomed quite as widely here if he decides to get into the race. But I still think that's up in the air too.
Joey, who does Senator Gardner want to run against, Hick or the field?
Oh, I think he wants to run against the field. If Gardner is so vulnerable, why are Democrats running like they're terrified? Why do they have to go out and recruit John Hickenlooper when they've got a field of some pretty quality Democrats out there? Either they're not taking anything for granted, or they know something that the punditry doesn't know, that Gardner's not going to be as easy to beat as they think that he is. And he's a great retail politician, so I'm looking forward. I've been waiting for 2 or 3 years now for a Hickenlooper-Gardner matchup to see who can win this contest of personalities. So, and if you don't think personalities and entertainment matter, then you haven't looked at who's in the White House. I say, get in, Hickenlooper. I want to see the show. I'll bring the popcorn.
People ask about politics with me. I really enjoy covering the circus. I'm with you there, Joey. Michael, if you're, Cory Gardner, and I only disagree with Patty in very careful situations. I think Gardner could actually defeat a coffee cup and maybe a lot of different people in the Democratic field. He thread the perfect needle when he beat Mark Udall. He only beat him by, I think, less than 2 points, but he thread the perfect needle. He was the guy in the rolled up blue shirt in front of a windmill, and he looked like a Democrat and then also Mark Udall ran the worst campaign he possibly could. If you're looking at this race right now and Hickenlooper jumps in, I don't know if he clears the field unless he can come out with some enormous poll that he's ahead of everybody. Are we looking towards a kind of a big food fight when it comes to the Democrats in this one?
Well, I think they're clearly going to stay in the race, and I think that's something that was talked about this week. They're not going to be welcomed in the field cleared. But I think there is some confidence given how bad Hickenlooper's presidential campaign was. They say you need to catch fire when you are running for president. I don't even think he got lukewarm. He was sitting at 1%. It was really bad, and it's tough. Presidential races have a lot of scrutiny. I think Michael Bennett's right behind him and exiting pretty soon. But I think when it comes down to the Senate race, National Democrats will be behind him. He's up early in the polls by a big margin. But he does have some problems. These people are going to stay in the race. They're going to go after him. You have progressives like Joe Salazar, who doesn't like him. John Morris came out and talked about the gun bills and said, look, this wasn't Governor Hickenlooper that did this. And you also have an ethics complaint that about Hickenlooper's travel that's still out there, hasn't gotten ruled on yet. And lastly, he said he wasn't cut out to be a senator and that he didn't want to do it. That could have an impact on some voters. But I think he's the front runner. I don't know how damaged he'll be coming out of this primary, but it's going to be a heavyweight fight between the top people on both sides of Democrats, Hickenlooper against Gardner.
Natasha, I long sometimes for the era of politics where either party would live by Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, being thou shalt not speak ill of someone. For him, it was your fellow Republican, but even to someone in your fellow party. That is not the era we live in right now. I don't think John Morris was a good example of Democrats more than happy to throw big fat mud balls right there at Hickenlooper. Does that mean he's maybe the national scene paved a much happier road for him than the locals here in Colorado when it comes to a possible Senate run?
I think it paved a lonely road for him, which is why he's no longer pursuing that path. I think the person who won the quote of the day yesterday was Angela Williams when she said this won't be a coronation. That I think is the takeaway. The interesting thing, though, if Hickenlooper does get into the Senate race, so often around this table we talk about, you're a voter staring at a ballot, and more often than not you're staring at two names against each other. So if it would be a Hickenlooper versus a Cory Gardner, this is one instance where I really don't think it is just that case, because then you have to look at who our other senator is. And if Bennett doesn't end up in the White House, guess what? He's still our senator. So then you start to look at who would be that second senator, and they're bringing something else to the table. And will Colorado voters, who notoriously are a fairly, not as even as it used to be, but split between Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated, would they look at a Bennett plus who's the next person and see enough diversity to match the state's needs? So I think that would come into play for Hickenlooper or whoever else is on that ticket against Gardner.